Cameron Macintosh is a Melbourne resident who's done an awful lot of study, including a course on writing with the RMIT, and he ended up as an editor for educational publishing. However, he has done so much more than that, and we're going to talk to him now. Cameron, how are you?
Thanks, Sue. Really good, great to be with you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So when you did, you started off going to uni and then you went to RMIT and did the course, was your plan to become an editor or were you always gunning to be a writer?
The plan was never to become an editor. I remember even during that course, I thought, sitting there in editing class thinking, I really don't want this to be my life. But I thought it could provide a pathway to becoming an author. And I took, in last year of that course, I took a work placement with an educational publisher doing some proofreading and editing, and I actually really enjoyed it. So, and that eventually led to kind of ongoing freelance work with them, and then eventually an in-house job as an editor, which I was so more or less stuck with for 8 years and really enjoyed it. It's a great industry to be part of.
What did being an editor teach you about being a writer?
That's a good one. I think it really, when you're spending your days kind of honing other people's texts, it really makes you conscious of the economy of your own language. And I mean, it's almost impossible to edit your own work properly, but we do our best. But I think, it's made me very aware of, both the economy of language and of tailoring language to the market or the readership, the specific readership you're working with. So,
many new writers are really scared about the editing process, and they've got this kind of view of editors as them. It's sort of them against us, whereas I don't find it anything like that. How have you found that going from being the editor to being the writer? How have you enjoyed that process?
I've loved that actually. And it's actually given me such a renewed respect for what editors do, because not only the kind of skills on a kind of grammatical, structural level they bring to it, but the diplomacy skills are just incredible. Like there's some times where I've submitted a manuscript with a massive plot hole in it, or even like a factual error, and the beauty of the editors I've worked with is that they've just been so lovely about just pointing it out so delicately and working together to resolve it, especially plot holes and things like that where potentially your ego could be on the line. I'm not bothered by that at all, but some people might be. But yeah.
My theory is I'd rather my editor pick it up than a reviewer or a reader did. I'm much happier to do it that way.
Exactly. It's so true. Yeah.
With educational writing, I'm assuming that's quite prescriptive in terms of the length of the book and what you write and the topic you write. Is that right?
Very much so. Like pretty much when you get a commission to write for an educational publisher, in primary at least, which is my field, you'll be writing for usually an established series or an offshoot of an established series, which has a lot of prescription in terms of page length, as you say, vocab and sentence length. But yeah, the big one's usually vocab. So, especially if it's very finely leveled series, you'll have lists that say, this level you're writing at, you can only use these words, or, you may need to use, bring in a new word, but that'll be a process of negotiation with the publisher. So, but funnily enough, it's the kind of constrictions that make it enjoyable for me now. I kind of find it's almost, stretching the analogy a bit, but it's almost like writing a limerick or a sonnet or something. You've got all these constrictions that actually kind of outwardly they channel your idea into a workable form anyway, and help you kind of crystallize what the essence of a story is or an idea is. So I've grown to really enjoy the frustrations of it in a way, because I think they kind of unleash you in a way. It's hard to describe, but yeah.
Yeah, it sounds almost like a word game, like it's almost like some sort of a puzzle or something to do. It sounds good.
It can be like that. And the thing is, you're always thinking you've got two hats on all the time. You're thinking, okay, I've got to fulfill this educational imperative. So I got to introduce these new words to the kids at this level, but at the same time, you've got to entertain them as well. And you don't want them sitting there reading this book thinking, you don't want them to see that kind of educational thinking behind it. That you just want them to enjoy the book and learn kind of by osmosis as they go. So
Well, you're also writing your
that's,
own work, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But when it comes to the educational stuff, what's the weirdest thing you've ever had to write about? This is coming from a former teacher who is used to working with educational books and readers, and sometimes you go, wow, that topic. Did you have one that's the strangest you've done?
strangest. None of them have been that strange, but there've been some really interesting ones that I've had to research in person. Like there was a series where I've got one of them here actually, where I had to interview a bunch of professionals in different fields. So this was my GP, and poor guy. So the research was interviewing my own doctor and then setting up a photo shoot in his surgery, uh, right, bringing in some family and friends to be patients. Another one we had. It wasn't my idea, but like the publisher wanted a book that went into breakdancing. And so they contacted a breakdancing teacher. And the research was, I had to interview him, and I had this guy in my kitchen showing me all the moves. It was really cool. It was like, what industry would this happen in? It was great. So things like that have actually, add to the fun of it as well.
Do you still do it, even though you're not breakdancing? I don't want to get into your hobbies. Do you still write for education as well as your own writing?
Yes. So, I mean, mostly, yeah, like I'm still doing a lot of educational writing. It's kind of my bread and butter, really. It's my income. And yeah, I mean, it's taken a long time to build up because it began as working, I've kind of taken some commissions from publisher I'd worked with as an editor. And then because it's such a small industry and a lot of the publishers and editors move from publishing house to publishing house, you kind of, over the kind of 10 or 12 years I've been doing it, kind of got to know people in 3 or 4 different companies. So I've been just, lucky that usually it's sometimes someone wants something. So it's been pretty steady on that front. I've been very lucky.
And yes, it's lucky, but it's also, you've clearly proven you do the work, you get the deadlines in. It's all those things that are important. They know Cameron will do that. So it's more than luck. It's hard work, and well done you.
Oh, thank you. Hopefully. I mean, it is about the relationships and the trust, really. I suppose in publishing in general, if someone commissions you to do something, they want to know that you're going to be, if you hit the deadlines, unless there's a good reason not to, and that you're going to at least attempt to give them the best effort. There's often a lot of redrafting. Don't you worry about that.
Good.
But I don't mind that at all. Yeah. So that's fine.
So Cameron, you go from that very, use these words and you're doing this topic to writing your own work. What made you want to make that jump?
I'd always been interested in trade fiction and writing for children anyway. And it got to a point when it was all about the idea in the end. Like when I was overseas, I was in Pompeii actually, wandering around the ruins, and then later at the archaeological museum in Naples, and seeing all these artifacts from Pompeii. Mostly just really, the ones that excited me were the really mundane domestic things like combs and oil lamps and things like that. You just look at them and you think, wow, whoever owned this would have had no idea it was going to be a museum piece one day. And that just sort of sparked the idea of like, might people in coming centuries look at things from our everyday lives and look at them with such kind of wonder? I mean, they probably will. So yeah, and then the idea was just, well, it'd be an interesting idea to have a future detective who's, you know, that's his interest, our artifacts from that we're living with now or have kind of lived with in the last few decades. And so that gave me my Max Booth character.
So
And,
the idea came before Max did?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yeah, so
how did that feel when you first sat down to write, knowing I can go off here, I can do whatever I like?
it felt really good, actually. There were, I mean, at the same time, I think the educational background did inform the actual way I'd sort of structured the books and in the sentences. I wanted them to be, I wanted it, like they're for sort of 7 to 10-year-olds roughly, but I wanted them to be accessible to reluctant readers and just sort of enthusiastic readers of science fiction, or, you know, they're not very heavy science fiction, but yeah, so I think I did sort of bring that editor's and educational author hat to it a little bit, but there's a lot more you can kind of get away with in trade, like a lot more scope for humour and, you know.
With Max, he's now into the 5th book.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep. So you must know him so well to be able to keep going. How do you develop your characters? How do you get to know them?
I had a few years to get to know Max in the beginning because I started that manuscript probably about 3 years before I submitted it to Big Sky Publishing, and it had had quite a few incarnations and rewrites, and it had been through my writing group and things like that. So it had changed quite a lot anyway. So I'd been living with Max in my head for about 3 years, and I think the big thing was matching him up with the sidekick, who's his robotic dog, Oscar. And once they kind of clicked together as a little team, I just sort of thought, yeah, I think I've got something that's kind of got legs and I can work with now. And coming up with the further adventures was more a case of finding just different kind of historical artifacts for them to investigate in each story. So
has that been
was the
hard?
tricky bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did you do that? How did you come up with each different artifact?
The problem was each artifact needed to be able to sort of tell a story that leads him on a different kind of adventure or into different kind of trouble. So the first one was a cassette tape, which contained some old music, from the 1980s, and then I was like, where do I go now? The next one was a mobile phone, which had some was full of selfies from some self-obsessed 20-something, and then when we went on to postage stamps and a film canister, and the latest one's a dog ID chip that's got some information about a very famous dog on it. So teasing these things out has been so much fun. Just think, where could I go with, well, the next one's about a GPS unit. It's like, wow, where can we go with a GPS unit? It's like, there's so many possibilities just to kind of play with. And it's been a kind of really playful process coming up plots for the further 5 that we've done. So,
and especially too with the way technology's changed over the past 20, 30 years, man, you've got about 100 books lined up there of different topics.
That's true, though. The good thing, I mean, it's given rise to a lot of possibility of interesting discussion between children and their parents and even their grandparents now, who, you know, like, I think a kid now looking at an old kind of phone I grew up with, the dial phone, would just think, what is that? You know, and it's explaining to them that, like, to talk to your friend, you had to kind of get through to their parents first half the time. And it probably just so archaic to like today's 10 or 11-year-olds, but
They are
to be
never
able to
going to understand the thing of taking the phone into your cupboard and shutting the door so that you're not going to be disturbed. And then your father going, get off the phone. They'll never have that.
So I just love the fact that it's kind of opening doors to those sorts of discussions within families or between kids and teachers. That's been a big kind of side buzz of the whole thing for me to see that happening.
So you've got 5 out, new one coming GPS. How many have you got contracted for, I guess? How many are you expecting to do?
At this stage, probably the 6, that'll probably be the last, I think, at this stage, but we'll see. I mean, yeah, looks like that'll be the last. I kind of feel like that's enough. It's because they're quite, like, each one's quite a big deal. They're, oh God, here we are, they're quite solid little things. They take a lot of doing, and they're all illustrated too. So that's, the lovely black and white line work by Dave Atsey, who's hilarious. Adds a lot of humour and pathos to them too. So yeah, but I feel like 6 is probably a good number anyway for this.
Yeah, I think so. You don't want to go, don't want to turn into one of those ones that goes on forever. Dave, do you work with Dave when you're doing when he's doing the illustrations, or do you just wait and see what he's going to come up with?
Well, when I write the manuscripts, I put in pretty brief illustration ideas throughout, and then all those after the manuscript's approved. And the extent of collaboration is that Dave will do the rough sketches and I'll get to comment on those. But really, I just try and keep out of his way because he's so good at it. He really clicked immediately, especially with the first one. I knew this, we're not going to have any issues here, because I was almost uncanny because the characters, he kind of drew them how I'd been seeing them in my mind the whole time and captured the kind of essence of the relationships and their humour just brilliantly. So
just looking at as you're speaking, I'm just looking at the covers, and he really has, and he's really nailed the dog too. The dog's like, it's particularly in selfie search, the look on the dog's face is just great.
The dog's everyone's favourite character, I think.
Or Max. So if you're coming towards the end of this, have you got a plan for what you want to do next?
Look, at the minute, my ideas are all things for older readers. I've drafted a young adult novel and an adult fiction as well, which is kind of a crime-ish thing. And it's just time though, isn't it? It takes so long to kind of redrafting, especially when you can see the plot holes. I'm not a very good plotter, so I have to kind of really think these things out in advance now. So I've been a victim of charging into projects and then having to go back and look at them and think structurally there's issues here. So that I'm in the process of sort of really looking at nuts and bolts structural stuff with 2 of those things at the minute as well. I love it.
Yeah. How long did you take to write, say, one of the Max Booths? Is that a long process too?
It takes me a long time. I always wonder how long it would take other people. Then, I mean, word count wise, each one's about 12,500. So they're not huge, but they're sort of, it's substantial enough piece of work. And I guess once I'd sort of nailed the synopsis in place and knew where I was going, the actual writing up, we'd probably be looking about a month, I guess.
Yeah. So just a last thing, because your experience is so wide and so useful for young writers or want-to-be writers, what advice would you give them about getting into writing?
I love that question. Look, obviously read a lot in the field that you're interested in writing in. Also, there's a lot to be said for community, like having a group, finding some friends who are equally passionate about storytelling as you are, and who you can turn to for honest feedback. That's just a huge thing. I've been lucky with that. I've got a really great writing group. Apart from that, like, there's a lot to be said, I think, for just having a disciplined approach to work, even if it's just half an hour a day of your own writing, just treating it kind of just almost, almost think of it as a job, just being really consistent in your practice. It's probably a hard thing to say to a 9-year-old, because they might not like they might not think that seems a bit pushy, but just believing in your art, or your ideas enough to really give them the time they deserve to develop.
And persistence, I think, is the other thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it has
Yeah,
been.
getting used to rejection in advance is a good thing.
I think the thing I learned, and I've said this before, the thing I learned a couple of years ago is that the publisher isn't rejecting you. It's the story they're saying isn't right. And that kind of shifted everything. And I went, oh, that's not so bad. Really, I can handle that.
It's so true. And there are so many stars that need to align for one piece of fiction to get the green light from a publisher. Like, it just needs to land on the right desk at the right time. And there's so many variables that you're just not in control of, so you can't take it personally.
No, yeah, you've just got to trust that the book will come out at the right time. It's interesting. It's fun though. You wouldn't do it you wouldn't give it up for anything, would you?
It's so true though. It's a very pleasurable kind of self-torture, but like, I can't imagine doing anything else.
Exactly. Cameron, it's been lovely to meet you. Now, the new book is out now, and when you go to get it, you can get all 5, because there's 5 of them there.
Thanks, Sue. It's been really great pleasure to chat to you today. I've enjoyed it.